you're having a problem with your furnace and you're thinking about your sail switch, you want to try these 3 things that we've done to make sure that ours is working properly. So before you replace this, check out this video. Okay, so you want to cycle through your furnace settings here. So I'm going to turn it off first just to recycle it. You hear click. Once it clicks, then you go ahead and cycle through your settings. Make sure you have your fan on auto. Go from cool to furnace. Increase your temperature here. We 82 degrees, and so your furnace should kick on. You should hear the fan engage first, which you hear the fan come on. In about 10 seconds, the sail switch should engage and allow the fuel to come in, and it should ignite, and that's what should happen. But if your fan is going, and after 19 seconds the whole thing just shuts down, which just will happen here in just a minute, then you know there's something wrong with your sail switch. And we know that because here in a minute you'll see that there's a code that flashes on the back of the furnace itself. There's a red, like a diode that just blinks, that it tells you different codes. And so as you look in here, you'll see that there are a blinking light, and you can see the reflecting off the back panel here. So let's take a look inside here, and we can see that there is reflecting red, and that blinking, if you pick out your manual, see that that indicates that every 3 seconds you'll see a one solid blink, that there's an airflow problem, and so we need to fix that. So we need to look at our sail switch. So let's take out our sail switch and take a look and see what's going on. So if you've had a problem with your furnace, then just know that you're gonna have to do this. So we are in a Micro Mini Winnebago 2100 model. So we're gonna take this off first. So you're gonna take 4 screws out of these right here. Then take this face cover off. Once you got that off, then you just turn this deal here, and this whole thing will just come off. Take that off, and then you've got 1 screw here. That's just right here. You just take this 1 screw out. That's just stopping the or holding the actual gas furnace in place. Once you've got that screw taken out, this whole thing should slide off. But before you do that, you also have to take this off just to access the gas line that's on the inside. All right, so you're gonna have to take your circuit breaker off as well. You can take this off. You have to just take this off, just so you could access and take the gas line off. I'll show you here in just a minute. So work on taking this off. This plate will come off, and then you'll just have to take these screws. That's where the 4 corner screws out. Once you do that, then this whole thing will slide out. All right, so once you got those 4 screws out, you're just gonna slide this on out, and you're just gonna set it down. Like I said, again, this is just so that way you can access the gas line and get this gas line free here, okay? Also, please note that to take off the gas line, you want to turn off the propane lines out front. So just turn those off, and then bleed out any excess gas that's in the line by using your stove top. Just, you know, light the burner, and you'll see it bleed out the excess gas. Okay. So make sure that so here's the switch here, right there. Make sure you set that switch off. That way it's off. And then that way you know that there's no gas going to it, and because there's no gas that can actually get to it at all now, and so there's no power getting to it as well. So, but make sure you follow your safety guidelines to your unit as well. So here's your gas line right here. You just want to disconnect this. Use your crescent wrench or whatever wrench you can use to get on there, and just turn that off of there. Disconnect that, and then this whole thing should slide out. Okay, and then also what you want to disconnect are these. Let's use it right now, but you're going to disconnect these vents. Just turn the whole thing. There's one on this side. Well, depending on how many vents you have, just make sure you disconnect all your vents so you can slide it actually out. I have another one on the opposite side. You just do the same thing and just turn it, and it just comes on out. Okay. All right. Once you got all that disconnected, you should be able just to slide this thing on out. Do a little wiggle. Don't yank it all the way out. Just yank it out because it's still connected some. But what you want to get to is to the back of this thing. Go ahead and stand it up like this. And so your sail switch is right here. So you're going to disconnect. You're going to take this screw out right here. Once that screws out. And so don't know if I'll be able to pull this out with one hand or not, but you can see that that's in there, but you can see the amount of dirt and debris that's in this thing. So that's probably what's preventing this thing from turning off and on, from actually activating. So I'm going to clean this. Okay, so I just completely pulled it out, and you can see the amount of like gunk buildup right on the switch. It's probably all it is. So we'll clean this and then give it another go. And you saw earlier that I cleaned out the sail switch, and so this says it has a soft lockout. So what that's telling us is that it's a timed lockout that's going to continue to try to reset it and start itself. So that's what it's going to do. In the meantime, I'm still doing some troubleshooting, and it says if the furnace starts but the blower doesn't turn on, or the blower turns on but it just won't light, that there's air in the propane line, and so you could purge that by turning on your gas, like your stove top or anything else that's further downstream from the propane tanks, or your thermostat's not set to a heat that's hot enough for the thermostat to work. So if it's 60 degrees inside, or if it's 75 degrees inside and you only got it set to 72, then you need to bump that up to like 80 or whatever, or just a higher temperature than the actual camper is, and then you should be able to kick on. But we tried both of those. So the next step for us is to wait to see if this thing will reset itself after a minute or so, and then we'll just probably have to go back in there and just replace the sail switch to see if it will do something. So yeah, my light's still flickering off and on there, so it's telling me that I still have the same airflow problem. So if your fan is burning but it's not igniting if it's not igniting the gas, that's what the problem is. It's not allowing this to bypass your gas to come on because it's not saying, hey, you got enough airflow. So this switch right here fails sometimes. So what you want to do is just disconnect that, just pull these tabs off, and then that way you just plug up the new one. So let's do that. So I like to just disconnect it and reconnect it, just so I know I've got the right one in the right area. So disconnected that one, the new switch, take that off, reconnect that one. And so it's got this little bracket on there, so I want to attach this bracket on here, and the new one just provided screws, so I'm going to put these little screws with the bracket that comes with it, so that way I have this attached on here. Okay, now that you got the switch attached, the cables, you got your new bracket on there, you just put this thing back in here, put the screw back on, and you should be good to go. I replaced my sail switch, and this sail switch is actually pretty good because I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And I found out this sail switch actually is still good. But the problem is that when you get this thing in here, now if you went through and did all the checks to make sure that this was getting power and this was actually, if when you hold it down yourself and it's getting power and it's igniting your furnace, then you know that the sail switch is good. Then what you need to remember, what I had to do, because this was actually a frustrating part for me, is like I had to go in here, and so if you're looking at this thing, the way this thing orients is it lays in here like this, and that fan pushes the sail switch back like that, and it ignites, right? So we know that's what it does. But what I couldn't get is the way this thing was oriented in this fan motor. See that fan motor's in there. So what happens is that fan comes on and it pushes that sail switch back like that. So, but if this thing is too far forward like this, if it's oriented too far forward like this, then that wind is not going to have enough pressure to pull that thing back. So it has to be oriented just right, so that way it just takes a little bit of amount of wind to pull that thing back to activate it. But if it's oriented too far forward like that, it's going to have a hard time trying to get that wind to get in there. So this has to be, and this is the finicky thing about this has to be oriented just the right amount of degrees, so that way it's sitting in there right, so that way just a lot of wind just pushes that back. So
keep that in mind when you're putting this back in there. And so I had to go in there and make sure that this, so this is the sail switch now that's in there that I replaced. See, it's sitting in there just like this, okay? And so I had to orient this thing, I had to tilt it this way, and then pull it back just a little bit like that, so that way the wind would hit it just at the right angle. And then that's finicky. So as frustrating as that is the resolve to this thing. So if you feel like you switched out your sail switch, you switched out your board and all these other things, just know that this sail switch is so finicky that if it's not oriented the right way when you put it back in there, it could be the problem to why it's not igniting. So now that I have this in here, and I'll just switch that on real quick, and you'll hear this thing ignite because this thing was killing me. I finally got it in there right. You'll hear this thing ignite here. It finally ignited, and it's giving me hot air. So again, just make sure that this thing is just oriented right, where it's getting the right amount of air pressure, or angled the right way, so it's getting the air that it needs to activate this switch. All right, once you got that in there, you want to secure this screw onto your bracket that you have. You have this securely in there, and just screw this down, and we'll go to the next step. All right, when you want to, when you put this back in here, you need to take this off, so that way, when you stick in your vent to the back of this, this insert, I'll show you here in just a second. This right here goes inside the tube, so it goes in like this. So you have to take this out and then show inside the tube here. You'll see that there's a hole there and cut out, so that slides out, and then this slides over top, or slides inside of there. So you have to take this out, and then once you're done with that, then you can slide this back in. Okay, so like what I was saying, so what happens is this from the outside, this slides in there like that. So you have to take this out from the outside, and then this right here goes in that little cutout that we showed just a while ago. That this will slide out to that. Okay, slide it back in there. Have somebody out here watching you and just kind of guiding you to make sure that tube is coming out of your cutout there. All right, and all you do is you just put this in here, and this will slide inside there like we showed you. Just slide in there, and then you screw this back down. Okay, next you want to reattach your gas line, and once we do that, just grab your, you gotta take this back out so you can see, but reattach your gas line, and that's it. Then you want to reconnect your vents. See how this came out? You just reconnect it. Just turn it back in there on both sides. All right, next you want to turn your gas back on, and then you want to make sure you bleed all the air out of your gas line. So you do that by you just light your stove to make sure you got gas going there, and just let that run for about a minute or so to make sure you get all the air out of your propane line. So that way when you run your furnace, you have no air in your line. Okay, next you turn your switch back on to make sure it's back on. Okay, next you want to just operate your furnace. So this is just the test phase. We're not done. We want to make sure it's testing to make sure everything's operating correctly. Okay, now we're going to check this to make sure it's working properly. So we're going to turn on our furnace, make sure we have our auto fan on. It's cool. You want to make sure that goes to furnace. We're going to kick this temperature up a little bit. Let's just put it at 79, and we should hear this thing kick back on. Obviously, you want to put your plate and all that stuff back on there as well. You should hear this thing kick back on. You should hear that sail switch engage. You're ignited. You should be good to go. Okay. Thanks for watching, and hopefully this has helped you with your furnace problems.